Adam's day began the same way it almost always did. He stepped out of his small apartment, buttoning his worn jacket against the cool morning air. The sun had just begun to rise, painting the sky with pale pinks and soft oranges. He walked down the narrow street toward the little bookstore where he worked, his breath puffing out in quiet clouds. Inside, the shelves were lined with old and new books, their spines gleaming in the early light. Dom loved that place. It was a haven for him, a quiet corner of the world where he could lose himself in stories when reality felt too heavy. But this morning felt different. His stomach was empty, and he worried about the rent that was due in 3 days. He worried about his mother's medicine, which cost more than he could easily afford. He worried about whether he would have enough change to buy even a small cup of coffee. Yet he tried to keep a calm face as he unlocked the bookstore door and flipped the sign from closed to open. A few early customers trickled in, smiling at him as they browsed the shelves. He greeted them softly, doing his best to keep their morning bright. After half an hour, he felt the need for a small pick-me-up. He closed the shop for a few minutes and walked to the nearby cafe he had come to rely on. It was a modest place, with wooden tables and chairs that creaked just a little when people sat down. The smell of fresh coffee mingled with the scent of baked pastries. A barista called out orders in a friendly voice as customers chatted quietly at their tables. Kata joined the line, pulling his coat tighter around himself. He watched the barista steam milk for a cappuccino and wondered if he could treat himself. He counted the coins in his pocket, $1.75. His heart sank when he saw the price of a simple latte. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, hoping no one would notice his disappointment. A few people ahead moved forward, placing orders and paying. Then a young woman stepped up. She looked tense, as if she carried the weight of the world on her shoulders. Her hair was tied back in a loose knot, a few strands escaping to frame her face. She wore a crisp blazer and dress shoes that shone under the cafe lights. But her eyes were shadowed with worry. She glanced at the menu, bored, then at the barista, and then at her small purse. Adam watched her fingers tighten around the strap. It was clear she was unsure if she could afford what she wanted. His chest tightened. He had been in that spot himself many times, wanting something small to make life easier, unsure he could spend the money. His heart told him to help. Without thinking much, he took a few bills from his pocket. He stepped forward just as the barista told the woman her total. "Your total is $5.20, the barista said, looking at her politely. Before the woman could open her purse, Adam spoke up softly. "I've got this," he said, placing his bill on the counter. It was more than enough. He felt a shameful flutter in his chest, as if he were exposing his own need by giving like this. But he forced himself to smile. The barista glanced at him, surprised, then pressed a button on the register. "Thank you, sir. That's very kind." The woman hesitated, her brow furrowed. She looked at Adam, then at the money on the counter. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The cafe noise seemed to fade into the background. "Ow." She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it. Finally, she gave a small, guarded nod. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I appreciate it." Adam nodded back, trying to seem casual. His heart raced, but he kept his tone even. "You're welcome." "Enjoy your coffee?" She turned and moved to the side, waiting for her drink. Adam stepped back into line for his own cappuccino, feeling a strange warmth in his chest. It wasn't the coffee yet. It was something else. A gentle glow, like he had done the right thing, even though he barely had enough for himself. He watched her as she waited. She wrapped her arms around herself, as if trying to hold in all her thoughts. He wondered what she did, where she was going after this. He wondered why she seemed so tense when she looked so well dressed. Her hands shook just a little when she accepted the cup from the barista. He felt a small tug of worry for her, as if he wanted to know her secrets and help ease her burdens. His own order came up. He stepped forward to take it, a simple cappuccino with extra foam. The barista smiled at him. "Here you go, Adam." He nodded, thanked her, then turned to leave. His eyes caught one last glimpse of the woman. She lifted her cup to her lips and took a slow sip. Then she turned and walked out the door. Adam paused. He could have reached out and said something more, asked her name, perhaps invited her to sit and share a table. But he hesitated. He was a quiet man by nature. He worried about imposing, about crossing boundaries he didn't understand. He sipped his coffee and walked back to the bookstore, letting the steam warm his cold fingers. He thought of the woman just once more, then shook his head and turned down the block. His day was waiting. The ringing of the doorbell when a customer entered, the turning of pages, the hushed voices of people lost in stories. He told himself he had done something kind, and that was enough. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of routine. A regular man came in to buy a cooking book. A mother and daughter browsed the children's section. A college student asked for a specific novel, and Adam led him to it with a friendly chat. Through it all, his thoughts drifted back to the cafe. He wondered who the woman was. He wondered why one simple act felt so meaningful. He imagined her facing some heavy moment, and his small gift had brought her a bit of comfort. By lunchtime, he had almost forgotten. He ate a simple sandwich in the back room, leaning against the worn wooden table, while he drank the last of his cappuccino. His mind found peace in the familiar hum of the store. Then his coworker Alina burst into the room. "You wouldn't believe the news," she said, breathless with excitement. "Open your email when you have a chance." He frowned, but nodded. He went back to the counter after the next customer left. His fingers tapped at the register's computer until he found his inbox. A message from a local news site caught his eye. The subject line read, "Local tech titan surprises town with generous gift fund." He clicked it, scrolling quickly. Pictures of a sleek office building filled the screen. A woman at a podium spoke to reporters, her face serious but kind. Under the photo, a caption named her Mara Bennett, CEO of Bennett Innovations. She stood tall in a sharp suit, a confident leader whose company had created life-changing software. The article went on to describe how she had donated a large sum to a new community center. It mentioned her massive success, her rise from a small town, and her deep drive to give back. Adam's eyes widened. He read the name again. Mara Bennett. She was that woman from the cafe. The one he helped, not knowing who she was. He stared at the screen, his mind racing. How could he have guessed? She had looked tense and broken, but instead she was powerful and wealthy. And she had a heart big enough to help others in her own way. His breath caught. He felt a strange mix of pride and embarrassment. He had given her a small kindness, and she was someone who gave millions to help people. He closed his eyes for a moment, thinking of her shy smile at the counter. He thought of the fragile way she had accepted his gift. And he realized that beneath her success, she carried hidden pain, something he could not yet understand. He shut the laptop and leaned back. His sandwich tasted dry now. His heart pounded. He felt as if he had crossed two very different worlds with one small gesture. And he knew that his quiet life had suddenly become more complicated and, perhaps, more hopeful because of her. ChatGPT said. The next morning, Adam woke with a light ache in his chest. He could still feel the surprise of learning the woman he paid for was the powerful CEO, Mara Bennett. He brushed his teeth slowly, staring out the small window of his apartment. He pictured her sipping that coffee, the tension easing from her shoulders. He wondered if she remembered him at all. He grabbed a quick slice of toast and walked to the bookstore. The bell above the door jingled as he arrived. He greeted Alina with a tired smile. "Morning," he said quietly. She looked at him with bright eyes. "You look restless," she teased. Adam shrugged, scanning the rows of books. He tried to focus on his work, but his thoughts drifted back to Mara. At lunchtime, he decided to go back to the cafe. He needed to see her face again, to feel the ordinary comfort of a shared space. The cafe was warmer than the street, with steam rising from the drink machines. The barista remembered him and smiled. "The usual?" she asked. He nodded and paid before the coffee was even ready. He found a small table by the window and placed his cup down, stirring gently. He watched customers come and go. Some chatted with friends, some sat alone, lost in a book or on their phones. He sipped his coffee, enjoying the slow rhythm of people, talking and cups clinking. Then the bell over the door rang again. He looked up, his heart skipping. Mara stood in the doorway, scanning the room. She wore a soft scarf today and a simple jacket. Her hair was loose around her shoulders. Her eyes settled on him, as if she had known all along he would be here. He felt a rush of nerves. Should he wave? Should he hide? She walked toward counter, then paused when she spotted him. She caught his eye and offered a small smile. Adam smiled back, lifting his cup in greeting. She nodded, then moved to order. He watched her carefully, noticing how her posture was softer than yesterday. Perhaps she felt safer now, after that small kindness. When she received her drink, she carried it carefully over to his table. Adam stood before she could speak. She placed her cup on the table and said, "Mind if I join you?" Her voice was calm, but a flicker of vulnerability passed across her face. He gestured to the chair. "Please do." They both sat, each with a cup of coffee between them. For a moment, neither spoke. The cafe noises washed around them. Adam took a slow breath. "I'm glad to see you again," he said, keeping his voice gentle. Mara looked at him with soft eyes. "I'm glad too," she answered. He cleared his throat, then asked, "So how did your speech go yesterday?" She took a sip of her latte before answering. "It went well," she said, "but it's always nerve-wracking." She touched the rim of her cup as if seeking comfort. He nodded. "Public speaking can be hard for anyone," he offered. She smiled, then laughed quietly. "Anyone?" she echoed. "You say that like you're a pro." He shook his head. "Not at all. I just sell books all day. I talk to people in whispers." She laughed again, soft and real. The sound warmed him. He realized that this was the first genuine laugh he had heard from her. He felt honored. He pressed on carefully. "What kind of coffee do you like?" he asked. She thought for a moment. "A flat white," she replied. "Strong, but smooth." He smiled. "Good choice." They talked about small things, the weather, favorite reads, weekend plans. Adam learned that. She loved old travel memoirs and dreamed of visiting the Scottish Highlands. She learned that he collected secondhand cookbooks and wished he could bake bread at home. They found common ground in simple pleasures. As they spoke, Adam noticed Mara's guarded expressions fade. Her shoulders relaxed. Her eyes grew softer. He realized that she trusted him enough to share these small details of her life. He felt a gentle pride, but he kept his tone humble. He knew their worlds were still far apart. When their cups were empty, they lingered. Neither wanted to end the moment. Mara glanced at her watch and sighed. "I should get back to work," she said. He stood too. "I understand," he replied. She hesitated, then said, "Thank you, Adam, for yesterday and today." He nodded. "You're welcome." She turned to leave, but paused at the door. She looked back at him. "I'll see you around," she said, and walked out into the morning light. Adam watched her go, feeling lighter than he had in days. Over the next few days, they kept running into each other. Sometimes at the cafe, sometimes on the corner where he walked to the bookstore, sometimes in the park across the street. Meeting was a chance to share a small kindness or a short laugh. They built a pattern: friendly greetings, quick chats, gentle smiles. One evening, Adam stayed late at the bookstore to help Alina close. He was stacking chairs when he heard a familiar voice outside the window. He peeked out and saw Mara walking by, her briefcase in hand. She looked tired. Without thinking, he ran outside. "Mara," he called. She stopped and looked at him, blinking in surprise. "Can I walk with you?" "Only if you don't mind the company," she replied. He grinned. "I'd love your company." They walked in silence. At first, the sun set behind the buildings, painting the sky in soft purples. The street was quiet. After a moment, Mara said, "You know, you're one of the kindest people I've met." Adam looked at her. "I just treat people how I'd like to be treated," he said. She nodded. He asked, "What made you so tense the first day?" She looked away. He stopped walking. She stopped too. He waited patiently. Finally, she spoke in a low voice. "I wasn't sure if I could afford the coffee." He blinked. "But you're rich," he said softly. She shrugged. "No one sees you as someone who needs help." Adam's heart pinched. "You deserve help just like anyone else," he said. She met his gaze. "Your help surprised me," she admitted. It made me feel normal. They walked again. He told her about his mother, how he paid for her medicine. She listened quietly, avoided talking about her big donations or her company. He wanted her to feel heard, not judged. When they reached her office building, she stopped. "Thank you for walking me," she said. "I'd like to do something for you," Adam said. She shook her head. "You already did," she replied. Then she smiled, a real warm smile that reached her eyes. She added, "Tomorrow, coffee on me." Adam's face brightened. "I would love that," he said. She nodded, then stepped inside. He watched her go, feeling as if a new door had opened between them. The next day, he arrived at the cafe a few minutes early. He saw Mara already there, standing by the counter. She waved. He joined her, and she ordered 2 coffees. She handed him hers when it arrived. "On me," she said with a grin. Adam raised his cup in salute. They sat at their usual table and talked about hopes and fears. He learned about her childhood town, a place she rarely returned to. She learned about his dream to own a small bakery someday. Each secret was shared in soft tones, as if they were sacred. Their unlikely friendship grew stronger. Neither of them cared about her title or his simple job. They cared about each other's stories, each other's kindness. They laughed more often. They offered small comforts. A tea when one felt cold, an encouraging word when one felt anxious. Adam realized this friendship was different from any he had before. It was built on trust, on careful sharing, on moments of real vulnerability. Mara felt safe enough to show her true self, a woman who had fought hard to build a life, but who still carried old scars. Adam felt honored to be a steady friend, someone she could lean on. By the end of the week, they had made plans to meet at the park for a walk and to try a new bakery down the street. They both looked forward to spending time together, not for any grand reason, but simply because they enjoyed each other's company. As Adam went home that night, he thought about how a single act of kindness, paying for a coffee, had grown into a genuine friendship. He smiled, feeling grateful for the chance encounter that changed both their lives. He knew there were still parts of Mara he did not understand, but he was ready to listen, to learn, and to walk beside her on whatever path lay ahead. They met on a quiet bench in the park, under the shade of an old oak tree whose leaves whispered as the breeze passed through. The sun was warm, but there was a gentle coolness in the air that made the afternoon feel calm. Adam had brought 2 bottles of water, and Mara carried a small bag. She reached into the bag and pulled out a simple, worn photo in a thin silver frame. She held it with both hands, her fingers tracing the edge. Adam leaned closer, curiosity mixed with concern. The photo showed a younger Mara, maybe 10 years old, standing between a man and a woman he guessed were her parents. They all smiled, but their eyes looked sad at the same time. Mara's voice was soft when she began. "This was before everything fell apart," she said, her fingers pressing lightly to her lips. Adam nodded, his own hand resting gently on hers. He could feel the tremor in her fingers. "I was a happy kid back then," she continued. "We lived in a small town. My father ran a small factory that made tools for farmers. My mother taught music to neighborhood children. Everyone knew us." She paused, taking a steadying breath, and one day everything changed. She set the frame on the bench between them. "There was a big scandal," she said. "People said my father was dipping into company money. They said my mother had covered for him. Newspapers and TV cameras came. The factory closed. Our home went up for sale. We lost everything." Her eyes looked away at the distant playground. She watched a child swing back and forth, feet reaching for the sky. "I remember standing outside our empty home, holding that photo. I didn't understand why people in town shouted at us or why the neighbors would not look at us anymore." Adam felt an ache in his chest. He wanted to tell her that none of it was her fault. He wanted to promise her safety. But he stayed quiet, letting her tell her story in her own time. She continued, voice barely above a whisper. "My parents were arrested. Not guilty, but they spent months in court. I stayed with my aunt for a while, but she said she couldn't afford me. Then I went from one foster home to another. Her lips quivered, and Adam offered her his water.
Dad.
She took a small sip, nodded, and set the bottle down gently. I felt alone, she said. I learned that I could trust no one. The park sounds, birds chirping, leaves rustling, distant laughter seemed to fade as Mara spoke. Adam's mind filled with images of a lonely girl, clutching a photo, wishing for a home. He took a deep breath and asked softly, "How did you find the strength to keep going?" Mara bit her lip, as if searching for the right words. I learned early that I had to rely on myself, she said. I threw myself into schoolwork, in computers. I found a part-time job helping with someone's website. I taught myself coding in the public library at night. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in pale gold, she described building her first small app. It failed, of course, she admitted with a small, rueful smile. But I learned from it. Saved every penny from odd jobs, delivering newspapers, tutoring kids in math, waiting tables on weekends. I kept going. Adam listened, amazed by her quiet determination. She looked at him, eyes clear and honest. I made a promise to myself that I would never be helpless again. I would build something that mattered, and I would never let anyone take my life away again. Her story wound through the years. Cramped apartment shared with strangers. Long nights debugging code. Days when she ate only cheap noodles so she could afford a course or two in programming. She spoke of mentors who believed in her and rivals who tried to crush her. She broke into tears when she described winning her first real contract, a small nonprofit that needed a website. I cried, she said, because I felt like a real person again. Adam reached over and held her hand, whispering, "You deserved every bit of success." Finally, Mara stood and picked up the framed photo. The setting sun cast a soft glow on the silver edge. She tucked it back into her bag. "I carry this with me to remember where I came from," she said. "To remind myself that no matter what I achieve, I was once that little girl who lost everything. And I will never forget her." Adam stood too, wrapping his jacket around her shoulders as a gentle breeze passed. She pressed close, grateful for his warmth. In that moment, neither of them spoke. They watched the children playing, the lights blinking on in nearby windows, and the world felt quietly hopeful, two people connected by trust. Sharing past wounds so they could heal together. Adam woke before his alarm that morning. Strange excitement pulsed through him, mixed with a soft knot of nerves in his stomach. He lay still for a moment, thinking of Mara and the story she had shared with him the day before. He could not stop remembering the framed photo of the little girl she once was, or the way her voice had trembled as she spoke of her past. He reached over to his bedside table and picked up his phone. He scrolled through the news article one more time, reading. Her name and title, Mara Bennett, CEO of Bennett Innovations. The words felt heavy in his mind. He closed his eyes and took a slow breath. Today he would see her again, and something inside him told him that things would change. He dressed carefully, choosing a clean shirt and his best pair of jeans. He brushed his hair and washed his face until the cool water felt like a fresh start. He took his time walking to the cafe, letting the autumn air clear his thoughts. The leaves on the ground crunched under his shoes, and a few birds chirped in the trees above. When he reached the cafe door, he paused and smoothed his shirt, then stepped inside.
Oh.
The barista gave him a friendly nod and began making his usual cappuccino. Adam thanked her quietly and found a seat near the window. He sipped his coffee slowly, watching the street outside. His heart pounded with anticipation. He wondered how Mara would react when he told her he knew who she really was. Would she feel angry that he had looked her up? Would she withdraw? Or would she appreciate his honesty? Before he could imagine more, the bell above the door jingled, and she walked in. Mara paused in the doorway and looked around. Her eyes found him, and she smiled, a little shy, a little tense. She moved toward him and sat down. He stood to greet her. "Good morning," he said, holding his cup out in greeting. "Morning," she replied, her voice soft. She reached for her own cup, and they sat in silence for a few seconds. The cafe chatter hummed around them, but they seemed to exist in their own quiet bubble. Adam put down his cup and looked at her directly. Mara's eyes widened slightly. He saw a hint of worry there. He took a deep breath. "Mara," he began, "I read your article again this morning." He paused to let the words sink in. She tipped her head, her forehead creasing in concern. "I know your story, your company name, everything." He tried to smile reassuringly. "I just wanted to be honest with you." Mara's cheeks colored, and she looked away. She reached for her coffee, taking a slow sip before answering. "I wasn't sure you would ever find out," she said quietly. "I've kept that part of my life very separate." Adam nodded. "I understand. I respect your privacy. But I felt I should tell you I know." He leaned back, watching her carefully. He saw her eyes glisten as if she wanted to cry. He felt a pang in his chest. "I hope you're not upset," he said softly. Mara set down her cup and ran a hand through her hair. She exhaled slowly, then looked at him squarely. "I'm not upset," she said. "I'm surprised." He gave a small laugh, I can imagine. He hesitated, then asked, "Can I ask why you didn't tell me?" She closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, her voice was steady but gentle. "'Cause I never wanted you to see me as the CEO. I wanted you to see me as Mara." He nodded slowly, understanding. "That means a lot to me," he said. "I like knowing the real you." Mara's mouth curved in a small, relieved smile. "Thank you," she whispered. Then she leaned forward slightly. "I'd like to show you my world," she said. Adam blinked. "Your world," he repeated. She nodded, excitement flickering in her eyes. "My office, the people I work with, my team. I want you to see how hard I've worked and why I do what I do." He felt his heartbeat quicken. Part of him feared stepping into her world of executives and big decisions. Yet another part felt honored and curious. "I would love that," he said. She smiled broadly and stood. "Then let's go now," she said. Adam set down his cup and followed her out the door. They walked together in comfortable silence through familiar streets, then turned onto a wider avenue where tall glass buildings reached into the sky. Mara paused in front of one shiny tower. "Here it is," she said, gesturing to the entrance. "Bennett Innovations." Adam stared up at the letters etched above the revolving doors. Inside, a receptionist greeted Mara by name and directed them to the elevators. Mara pressed the button for the top floor. The ride-up felt long, and Adam tried to steady his breathing. He watched the floor numbers click upward until they reached the 30th. The doors slid open to a sleek lobby with polished floors, modern art on the walls, and soft lighting. Mara led him through a wide corridor lined with glass-walled offices and collaborative spaces, where people typed on laptops or talked quietly in small groups. He watched faces light up as they saw Mara pass. She greeted each person warmly, using their names and asking about their work. Adam followed behind, noticing how respected she was. She smiled at him and whispered, "These are the people who believed in me when no one else did." He felt a swell of pride for her, but also worry that he didn't belong here. Yet she reached for his hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. They entered a large office with a panoramic view of the city. Mara sat behind a long desk, and Adam took the chair. Opposite her, she gestured for him to look out the window. "This view reminds me why I push myself so hard," she said. "I never want to feel helpless like I did as a child." He nodded. The room was warm, and the late morning light shone through the windows. He felt calm, despite the grandeur around him. Mara stood and walked to a cabinet, pulling out a small booklet. She handed it to him. "This is our new project," she said. He opened it carefully, seeing designs for software that could help schools manage student resources. "We're planning to launch this next month," she explained. He glanced at the diagrams and user stories, impressed by the thoughtful details. "This is amazing," he said. "You're making a real difference." She looked at him, pride and vulnerability mixed in her eyes. "Hope so," she said softly. "I want to give back to the community that raised me. I want to help others who feel alone." Adam laid a hand on her arm. "You're already doing that," he said. Reached over and hugged him gently. He hugged her back, feeling her gratitude and the depth of her mission. When they stepped out of the office, They passed a row of smiling employees who waved at them. Mara led him down to the ground floor lobby. "That was my world," she said. "And now it's yours too." Adam nodded, breathing deeply. He felt both humbled and inspired. They walked outside, and the autumn sun felt warm on their faces. He looked at Mara, her face calm and confident. He wanted to tell her how proud he was. But instead, he wrapped her in a gentle hug. She rested her head on his shoulder and whispered, "Thank you for coming." He held her close. "Thank you for trusting me." In that moment, their two worlds had joined. Nothing had to be hidden anymore, and they both felt they were stronger for it. The morning sun felt soft and kind as Adam and Mara walked side by side toward the community center on the edge of town. Mara stopped at the front doors and smiled at him. "This is where I wanted to bring you today," she said. "I've funded this place so kids can learn coding and art for free." Adam nodded, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. He remembered how hard Mara had worked to build her company. Now he would see how she chose to share her success. They entered the bright foyer. Colorful posters lined the walls. Children's drawings and computer-made designs filled every bulletin board. A cheerful woman at the reception desk greeted Mara by name. "Good morning, Ms. Bennett," she said. "And is this your friend?" Mara introduced Adam with pride. The receptionist's eyes lit up. "We're so glad you're here," she said. "The coding class is about to start." Mara led Adam down a hallway where the sound of typing and quiet laughter floated out of the rooms. They paused outside. One door. Inside, 12 children sat at small desks, each with a laptop open. A young instructor guided them through basic programming exercises. The children's faces glowed with excitement as they watched their simple lines of code create shapes and colors on the screen. Mara whispered, "This is the beginners group. These kids come after school to learn skills they might not get anywhere else." Adam watched a girl carefully adjust her code until a cartoon cat pranced across the screen. The girl's grin was wide. Adam felt tears of joy welling up. He whispered to Mara, "They look so happy." She squeezed his hand. "That's why I do this." Next, they stepped into the art room. Here, children painted and drew with bright watercolors and markers. One boy worked on a self-portrait, while another painted a city skyline. A volunteer teacher guided them, offering gentle encouragement. Mara explained, "Every Saturday, we host art workshops. Some of these kids don't have art supplies at home." Adam watched a young boy mix colors, careful and deliberate. He nodded to the teacher. "What a wonderful place you've created," he said. The teacher smiled and said, "Ms. Bennett's gifts make this possible. You see them grow." In confidence, every week, they moved on to the guidance office, where a counselor spoke softly with a teenager. Mara introduced Adam quietly, and the counselor greeted him warmly. "We offer support to students who face challenges at home or school," the counselor said. "It's not just about academics. We help them feel safe." Adam felt awe for Mara's vision. He realized her generosity went far beyond money. She gave her time, her heart, to build a place where children could thrive. After the tour, they stepped outside into a courtyard filled with flowering plants and benches. Mara led Adam to a stone bench beneath a blossoming tree. He sat first, then she sat beside him. A gentle breeze shook petals from the branches. They watched children play tag on the grass. Adam said softly, "I can see how much this means to you." Mara looked at him, her eyes shining. "It's my way of healing," she said. "I never had a place like this when I was young. I want these kids to know someone believes in them." He listened, then asked, "Do you ever feel afraid to give so much?" She sighed, picking up a fallen petal and turning it in her fingers. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But then, I remember the little girl who lost everything. I remember how alone she felt, how I can reach out to children who need a friend." Adam touched her arm gently. "You're that friend," he said. She smiled, leaning against him. They stood and walked back into the center. In the main hall, a group of parents had gathered for a presentation by the center's director. Mara and Adam joined them. The director spoke about success stories. A shy girl who used coding skills to build an app helping her classmates with homework. A boy who found art as a way to cope with his parents' divorce. Parents nodded, some wiping tears. Adam felt proud. As he watched Mara listening with empathy, he realized her strength was her kindness. After the meeting, Mara introduced Adam to a few parents and students. He shook their hands and praised the center's work. A young mother thanked him for coming. He smiled and said, "Thank Mara. She invited me and I'm honored to be here." The mother nodded and said, "Your support means a lot too." Adam noticed how Mara blushed with pleasure. It was clear she valued every word of gratitude. That afternoon, as they left the center, Mara suggested they stop by a small cafe across the street. They sat at a corner table, ordering tea and a slice of lemon cake. They talked quietly, enjoying the sweetness and the calm. Adam reached across the table and took Mara's hand. "I'm proud of you," he said simply. Mara's eyes welled up, and she squeezed his hand back. "Thank you," she whispered. "Dude, I couldn't have done it without people who believe in me." He smiled, "And I couldn't feel luckier to have met you." She laughed softly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Remember when I paid for your coffee?" he teased. She grinned. "I remember exactly," she said. "I never expected I would repay you with so much." They sat together, sharing cake and stories, grateful for the journey that had brought them here. As the sun dipped low, they walked back toward the bookstore, hand in hand. The streets were quiet, lined with warm streetlights. Adam glanced at Mara and felt his heart swell. He thought of her past, her struggles, and the shining hope she offered to others. He knew their bond was more than kindness or coincidence. It was a promise to stand by each other, to heal together, and to build something good. When they reached the bookstore, Mara paused and turned to him. "Thank you for everything," she said. "For listening, for caring, for believing in me." Adam wrapped his arms around her. "Thank you for sharing your world," he replied. They stood like that for a moment, holding each other beneath the glowing sign. Finally, they stepped inside. Adam flicked the sign from close to open, as if inviting her into his world too. He led her to a worn armchair in the reading corner, and they sat together, watching the soft glow of the lamps. He opened a book and read aloud a passage about hope and new beginnings. Mara listened, leaning her head on his shoulder. Outside, the city settled into night. Inside, two people from different worlds dreamed together of a better future. Their lives had intersected over a simple cup of coffee. That one small act of kindness had grown into a deep partnership. And as they sat there reading and holding hands, they both knew that this was only the beginning of their true story.